Hey, what's up everybody? Rob here from Ram Studio Comics. Welcome back. So in today's video, we're going to draw out a sketch of a face, but then we're going to make that at an angle. So I've had this requested. I've done a few of these, but I figured this would be kind of a good one. So a little bit of an angle, but with a little bit of an up tilt. And I'll kind of illustrate why I think this can be tricky and what are some of the things to look for when trying to improve upon this. And I'll be adding some more of these videos to my course content, so I'm not going to bore you with that, but if you're interested, there'll be links in the description box below for other course content to learn more of these techniques. Okay, so with that said, what I'm doing here is a bit of the Andrew Loomis method. So a circle, a line down the middle of that, a line across the middle this way, so horizontally and vertically, but obviously at an angle, and then you would chop off the sides. Now the reason I jump past this is because I don't typically use it in the way that that book illustrates. So what I generally will do is I'll use the circle, because our heads are pretty spherical for the most part, the top cranial mass, and then a line down the middle like this, line across like this, and that's pretty much all I really, when you do this part, you add this disc shape off to the side and you bring that line over. I think that kind of, to me, it throws it off a bit, so I don't do that one as much. I do think about the face being 1/3, so I do focus on that. I do use the fact that the eyes are about halfway down, and then also the nose, which I feel is a little bit higher, especially from this angle. I use the eyes and nose, or brow and nose, to find the ear. Okay, so another trick that you'll do is you'll split this into quadrants. You generally place the ear on that back quadrant. So I don't adhere to that one specifically, and that's why I kind of jump across it and I start to place in the shape of the face. Now this is going to be very determined upon, or very based upon, how you draw, what type of characters you like to draw, and things like that. It's also why I jump past it, because when you stylize characters, you're just going to throw a lot of this out of the window. So, let me make this a bit larger, so if I can make this as evident as possible. Okay, so now as I've got that circle in there, I've got my 1/3 kind of established. I've got this jawline that squares off. So what happens is the more the head starts to go up, the more this jawline will appear more straight to the head. And the way that it will connect down, generally you can kind of draw this little bit of a V below the chin like this, and the sternocleidomastoids, the neck, whatever these things are, sternocleidomastoids, they come up like V's. But one thing I will say there, you want to be very careful, and actually from this angle, this one's going to kind of disappear on the very side there. You want to be very careful of over illustrating those. So now that's going to depend on your style and what you're really after, but generally you're going to hint to these more than draw a specific line tracing them out. So we'll worry about that here in a second. The ear can be defined as pretty much just a kind of disc shape at first, so we'll start with that. Get the back of the head here, have it come forward. The head obviously widens out and gets broader, thicker to the top, but we're going to ignore that for the moment. We're just going to get a lot of this in place. You can make the argument that the head is flat on the side here. There's also a relationship from the top of the ear to the chin. So I believe that's from the Andrew Loomis process, and that's a good one I think to keep. There's also a bit of a triangular shape. There's actually a lot of triangular shapes that can be found in the face, and I think it's good to exploit those, because you're going to really be able to align things and get a very dimensional feel with a lot of triangular and blocky shapes at first. So get those in there. So the brow kind of comes up and then back down, over, back down. So you could kind of get that in there rather quickly. There's going to be a bit of an indent right here for the eyes, so I'll draw those in with angles. I'll also check the work as I go by drawing across the face like this. Same thing here. The mouth kind of comes down as a triangular shape like this, so that from the sides of the nose down to the sides of the mouth. The mouth also lines up to the inside pupil area, roundabout. Again, you're going to move this all around. Now, the thing to think about here is that this side of the face will be much wider than this side based on perspective and foreshortening and things like that. So you gotta really be aware of that, and as you're drawing this side in, because it's very easy to want to bring it way out here and keep things even or something, and then all of a sudden you get a very disproportionate face. So that's something to think about. And generally, I would side on this. I would err on the side of making the eyes smaller at first, because it seems like it's real easy to kind of overdo it and go too far in the other direction. So I generally will draw kind of these smaller eye openings at first, and then if I want to overly stylize and bring it out further, I will. The other thing is this: it's really easy to want to bring the nose straight down from the middle of the brow. So, but in realism, you're going to see that from an angle like this, the nose is generally going to come out pretty far. I'm going to illustrate this kind of silly looking, but it does. It comes out and it blocks the eye. In fact, from a lot of angles, the eyes will get very tucked back behind the nose, the bridge of the nose, especially if they have more of a like hook nose or something. It comes out like that. It's going to block that eye almost immediately. So those are studies that you have to do specifically of that area to really pay attention to that. The other thing is this: I'm going to draw it off to the side because I don't know that I'll show it in this character. But when the eye gets to the side of the face from a specific angle, it disappears, or the face will disappear right behind the eye. And this is very tricky to get right, and it oftentimes will give this illusion that the eye is kind of floating if you don't do it right. But what I like to think of it as is this: when the eye comes over this way and it starts to get close to the brow, the curvature is what you're drawing right there. Not so much at the eye. It's not like you're drawing the eyeball like this, basically. It kind of resembles that in a way, but it's really the curvature, and then that will actually, generally from a specific angle or a more extreme angle, it will appear to be in front of the face from this angle because of the shift of the brow. And likewise, the nose a lot of times will come in front of it like this. So it's really paying special attention to these areas and getting this this information down and kind of in your brain, and which I think when we draw comics, a lot of times we just don't really think of it like that. We just draw whatever we think looks cool. But the more you get a little bit of resemblance of reality in your work, the better people will relate to it, and it'll come across as professional and cool and all this. When really it's just you're paying attention to stuff. You're getting these little kind of mental notes in the work. Okay, so the lip, generally the lips are closer to the nose than they are to the chin. So instead of dividing that right in half, you got to be aware of that. You can actually divide that into thirds, and the lip will kind of fall there. But I just kind of eyeball it, for lack of a better term, and I make sure that the lips are closer to the nose. Okay, and then and remember, this is all structural. I'm just getting in some kind of cliff notes into the work that I'm getting ready to do. So I get a lot of this structure in place. I'm throwing in these little shapes. Remember that the ear can be said to be a C and a Y. Not quite up and down like that, but a Y that's kind of curved. So then when you draw that in, you get this kind of Y shape. You get this little hook right there. And depending on how detailed you want your ears to really look on your character. So I do kind of a simplified version there, but and then there's that. And then after you've got this 1/3, you can pretty much put the brow line up top. So remember we talked about this being divided into 3 equal spaces. The brow is kind of at the top of that 1/3. So we can get in some, I'll just do a funky little hair shape here. And with hair, it's best to start out very light and lots of gaps. Don't try to draw each little strand. At least it doesn't work out well when I do that. So I draw on lots of separation at first, and then I go back through and I pick apart details of it and try to elaborate from there. So I kind of just hint to the design of it at first. Okay, so now the iris is 1/3 across the eye, kind of a little pupil to make it look like it's more of an intense stare. Okay, so there's our rough groundwork of it. There's lots of different things you get into this and say, okay, you do eyes this way, you do the face structure this way, all these different things, right? But we're gonna just take it from right here. I'm gonna make a copy, so I'll just hold Alt, drag over, And let me take the first one, scale it down a bit. I always like doing this anyways because I spot certain things when the artwork's smaller. So I purposely try to draw this larger for you guys as the viewer, watching. But I really spot more of the inconsistencies and flaws when things are smaller and or flipped. So we're going to soft erase that back. And now I'm going to come back through and I'm still sketching, but depending on how confident I feel with what I'm working on at the moment, I might go right to drawing it in or inking it in or whatever. But in this case, I'm still kind of trying to find certain elements of the work. So I'm just going to draw through this a bit more, or sketch through this a bit more, I should say. The reason why I like to do that, I like to stay in the sketch for as long as possible until I'm really sure about what I want to see. And I like to keep the lines loose for as long as possible because I tend to get more expressive behavior out of my lines if I do that. If I go into refining too soon, I start to stiffen up. The work becomes more stiff and lifeless. So it's very important to think about that with your drawing process and really kind of figure out where where those barriers are for you. When you draw the best, when you're maybe refining too early on and losing some of that expressiveness. So just be very aware of that and practice different variables in the way that you create, whether it be time constraints or even different ways that you create. Sometimes by using just a different process altogether, you can break out of any kind of bad ruts that you're finding yourself involved in. Okay, so let me focus on this. I'm just going to draw this out. I'm going to try to get some of the curvatures of the jawline. Obviously, this is a little bit more stylized for comics, but still want to make it look a little bit realistic in the way that you might see something. So again, I want to just hint to those neck muscles there. A little bit of the Adam's apple there. One thing I will say about, especially as it pertains to comics, hinting towards things is a lot better than tracing them. For one, it's faster, which is always great when you got deadlines looming. And then it also gives, back to the expressive behavior, it almost gives a more expressive, interesting feel to the work. When you trace everything out, it's almost like you're telling the viewer, look, this, like for instance, if you were to go, this is an eye. That's exactly the way an eye is. You're not leaving anything to the imagination if you trace every single line. But if you hint towards the line and you just hint towards even shadow and details, you get this very expressive look to the work. And I think you bring them in as almost like they're developing the work too. They're seeing into it a bit more than just you illustrating every tiny detail for them. You're not leaving anything to the imagination, I guess. So yeah, I would really experiment with the amount of detail that you place and how you connect the dots, essentially. Hopefully that makes a little more sense. So yeah, so little details here and there. Again, still trying to be a bit sketchy and try to figure out some of this information, and trying to use as much of the sketch lines that are in place as possible. I always feel like the more I can leave those in there, the better my end result generally will be, because I've got all this little bit of sketch line to work with and kind of help me to come up with ideas. I'm not working off any reference here. I'm just drawing from the brain box and trying to come up with a cool character that looks like they're intensely looking up at something for whatever reason may be going on in the storyline. But I have to come up with ideas as I do this. So that's why I leave a lot of those sketches in place. When in doubt, just soft erase and redraw over top again, and hopefully a new series of ideas will present themselves. That being said, though, if there's a really bad or distracting element from the work, you got to get it out of there. That can be a tough one too, because sometimes when you're doing this and you're expecting a good idea to present itself, you kind of just keep going when in reality it's just not there. It's just gonna it's hurting the look. And I think the silhouette is generally a good example of that. Even this hair, I'm kind of feeling it, like it just doesn't look good. You know, I felt like it started to, but then it started to look kind of weird. And you know, so sometimes you got to get that information out of there. You know, you got to change things quite dramatically for it to work. So sometimes a complete erase is necessary to do that. But I'm a glutton for punishment, so I'll try drawing over the same thing once or twice before I really exit out of there. Okay, so let's say that he's still got some funky hair. Bad hair day. Okay. Let's go with something like that. Okay, so there's a bit more of a rough sketch. I think the forehead's a bit off too. So let me do this. Let me flip this, because sometimes I'll be able to spot pretty significant flaws just by doing this. And yeah, I think the face structure is a bit off. Now, obviously, there's all different types of characters. We could say, no, it's just the way this guy looks. Or we could own up to it and go, no, this guy's got a weirdly misshapen face here. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and hold Alt, drag that over again, Command T, hold Shift. Actually, I don't think I even have to hold Shift. No, that's a different program. It actually looks a tiny bit better, smaller, so that could be a good sign. Let's go back to this now, and let's soft erase one more time. And obviously, I can make some, you know, being that we're working digitally, I can make some pretty significant changes, you know, by just grabbing things and moving them around. I could grab this eye, hit K for move it down just a little bit. No, it's too far, I think. You know, so I can play around with things like that, obviously. I think it's more the jawline. It's not like the information doesn't look like it's pushed back far enough over here. But I'm just going to draw through it just to keep this video not too awfully long, since I'm trying to do all this in real time. So, but here I would go back through, and if I wanted to really clean this up, I'd do it on another layer. And I want to get this, I want to give him a bit of a heroic jawline, so I'm going to bring out the chin a little bit with a more significant line weight. And I want to get a little bit of that transition from the neck. And I just want to try to hint to some of this. And I could probably bring a bit of a drop shadow down into here. And I'd probably shade this in a different way if I really felt I had more time, but I'll just go with kind of the quick and easy effect here. So again, notice I'm trying to put little line breaks in as I refine this. So I put a thicker line, you know, nice variety of lines. I'll tell you, I like one way that I saw it put in somebody's video. I think it was Patrick Brown, who does some amazing artwork, and he said I try to give the line what do you say, movement. I keep the line moving. I give it movement and expressiveness. He put it in a way that made a lot of sense, and it was something like that, like try to keep the line moving, and it does, because you want this to look lively. So again, you want to really fight the urge to do the same line around everything, because it'll really start to flatten out, won't be as expressive. So keep the line moving, and check out his work. You'll see what he said there, but I'm probably slaughtering it. I can't think of it specifically. I think it was moving, but some amazing work. Very energetic style. So let's see here. So underneath the nose, we'll get some of the plane change in there. Kind of a weird nostril. But see, each opportunity to go back in here and draw this is another opportunity to make an adjustment, refine something, pick it apart. But I try not to just trace my own work. Essentially, I mean, obviously I am tracing it, but I'm not keeping it exactly the way it was before. I want to add something to it. If I'm, you know, back here again, revisiting the work, I want to bring a certain amount of expressiveness to it each time. And all this is just style choices. I'm not going, you know, I got this very specific idea of what I want to place here and place there. Just kind of quickly make style choices as I go. But if you've put all this base information in place, you're not doing as much guesswork as you might imagine. You've got a lot of that foundational work there, and you're just being a bit creative in the way that you draw over top of it. So that's a little variation. I think it's neat too, if you put the shadows in just the right spot, you can get away with skipping a line, not even connecting a line. It's really neat how our brains can see into that a bit more. And I think when you're new to drawing, you feel like you have to draw. You don't want people to misread your work, so you draw everything in. You know, oh, I got to show them how this looks. I got to show them what I meant here. I don't want somebody to think this isn't what it is. You know, we get more worried about what we're creating, but then as you get more confident with this, you really start to just skip steps, and it looks better because of it. So you can definitely over illustrate things, I guess is the point. So little textures for the, you know, give them some age lines. Remember that the more detail you add to a face, generally the older you're going to make the character look. Likewise, if you're drawing women, less is more. You know, you're going to generally get a more attractive female by drawing less defined line work. Ask any woman, I'm sure she'll know the answer to that one. Okay, so get in some of these little flips of Joe Cool's hair here. Again, I'm kind of skipping areas and just kind of throwing in little bits of detail, but try not to overdraw every strand. You know, if anything, just get in here and place some shadows off to the side of little areas. See how that works first. We could get a drop shadow in behind the ear, something like that. So yeah, so on and so forth. I'm not going to overly this video is probably already pretty long, but hopefully that gives you some ideas on how to draw an angled face, an angle, and an up tilt. And this is tricky. Like, one of the areas you really want to pay attention to when doing your studies is right here, the way that the neck looks. And I'm sure this looks a bit skewed and a bit strange. Probably should even pulled from reference here, but the thing I would say is pay attention to the way it comes down and connects, where it connects, how it transits, the amount of triangular shape that you get there, pyramid-like shape, and then also the way that this would be like the Adam's apple, the way that this looks from certain angles, where it's positioned. I think it would actually need to be more to the edge of the neck from this angle. So you really want to pay special attention to connection points. And then past that, you know, redraw it lots of times. Practice makes perfect, obviously. So I appreciate you tuning in and watching this video. I'd love to know what you think in the comments section below, as well as what you'd like to see in the future. As always, I appreciate your support of the channel. Keep drawing, keep having fun, and I will talk to you soon.